So, as we stated before, this clip is quite a bit grainy, and it could use a little bit of work. And that's not very uncommon because, A, most 360 footage tends to look really soft, and it can be quite a problem if you're shooting with the omnidirectional camera, the spherical dome-shaped camera. That's what happened with this clip, and as a result, we got a lot of softness out of it. So let's see if we can't fix it with the Skybox tools. I'll start by going back to the effects panel here, and I'm going to type in metal right here in the search bar, which will help me find those faster. And I'm going to start with Skybox denoise. So I'll just give it a click, drag it right onto the street intersection clip, go up to my effects controls, and scroll down to see the Skybox denoiser right here. So by default, this plugin automatically has the noise type as random valued. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to salt and pepper. And you'll notice the difference as soon as I make the change. It looks less grainy, and from my experience, the random valued option tends to make it look a little softer. So I'm going to go with salt and pepper, and I'll decrease the noise level by increasing this slider up here so we can see how much we can take out. Alright, 0.50 looks pretty good. So I'll click on this FX button right next to Skybox denoise, and that'll toggle the effect off and on. Before, after. Didn't do too much, did it? In fact, in my opinion, it kind of looks a little worse. So here's an idea. Let's scrap it. I'll give it a click and hit the delete key on my keyboard to make it go away. Why don't we try the Skybox Sharpen tool instead? So I'll just come down to the effects browser, drag and drop that on instead, and here it is. I'll hit the twirl down, and let's crank it up. That looks better, but in fact it looks a little too crisp. It almost looks kind of fake, like a cartoon. Not exactly what we're going for here, so here's an idea. Sharpen is a really good tool, and again, because it's the Skybox Sharpen, it's not going to cause any sort of stitching when our viewer is panning left and right and up and down. But why don't we try something else? Oftentimes, if you can't fix a dark shot, for instance, the grain up here in the image or how the light looks soft and kind of muddy, we can use the art of creativity to hide those defects. And here's how we can do it. I'm going to come up to my effects browser again, and this time I'm going to look in the Lumetri presets. If you're not familiar with Lumetri, it's a framework built into Adobe Premiere, and essentially it's a color tool. It's like having those Instagram filters built right into Adobe. And normally, all you have to do is find one that really suits the image. For instance, I really like this CineSpace 50, so I'll drag it onto the clip, and as soon as I do, it automatically creates a really novel, high contrast, high dynamic range video clip. It's pretty impressive. And I'm going to tweak it just a bit by coming down here in the effects controls for this clip. I'll twirl down the curves option right here. And since I know that the darks in the image are creating a muddy, grainy feel, I'm going to use this to pull down the blacks inside of the clip. And so instead of exposing those imperfections, we've used the art of color correction to hide them. I'm also going to grab the top here, which will be some of the light parts of the image. And I'll bring that up just a tad so we don't darken everything out. And I'll play with the midtones here in the center just a little to see if we can retain some of that original color. When you do this sort of color correction, always remember that less is more. For now, let's go ahead and give this guy a twirl here in the VR viewer. And I'd say that looks pretty great. Now again, it's not perfect because, well, the shot wasn't perfect, but considering the before and after, in fact, let's go ahead and take a look. I'll go ahead and toggle off the Lumetri color, turn it back on, and while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring down the sharpening just a little. A lot. Let's keep it at 7. I'll toggle that off. And as you can see, what I'm doing here is ultimately tweaking and creating a fine dance between the Skybox Sharpen tool and the Lumetri color. And the end result is a much better and well-modified 360 video content that looked quite amateurish and blurry beforehand. So I'd say not too bad for about 5 minutes of work. Now, normally I would not be adding Lumetri color into a clip unless I was doing a full pass of color grading on all these clips. However, this clip absolutely needed it, because there seemed to be no other option. I could add a glow if I wanted to, or maybe blur it out a little bit, but even with the sharpening, it just didn't work that well. So sometimes you have to get creative by using multiple aspects of a shot. And in this case, it worked best using color grading with the Lumetri tool. And again, we use this Skybox Sharpen tool because the regular Adobe plugins are not suited for 360 video. With that being said, keep in mind that color correction is an exception. And thankfully, color correction works beautifully with 360 video because color in and of itself does not have a three-dimensional sphere that it has to worry about. And speaking of 2D, let's talk about adding two-dimensional objects like logos or text into a 360 environment to make it look like it's actually in the scene.